Um, but it talks about making foreign policy accessible, and that's a big thing that you've done. Is you like, why does foreign policy matter to you? Is a big part of what you've kind of said. So, just walk us through exactly that. That how have you become this kind of rock star of foreign policy? And like, I mean, I got a 17-year-old, messaging me saying, I want to come and get a selfie with Dr. Jaishankar. I've got messages like
Okay.
this only for like Vicky Kaushal and Shah Rukh Khan Adda, but I've not. So
Okay. Now let me in a way two questions. One, why how foreign policy has become popular, or why is it relevant? The other, in a way, why the book? I mean, one flows from the other, because I wrote the book primarily to convince people that today foreign policy does matter to you, that it is not something which is on the inside page of Indian Express. Occasionally there are first page stories as well.
yeah.
But if you actually look at our lives, last 5 years, 10 years, with each passing year, something abroad has happened which has fundamentally changed our life. And the biggest thing in the last 5 years has been COVID. When first news of COVID came out, this would have been early January. Which one of you would have thought that next 2.5 years, this is going to take over your lives? Now, it's not just COVID. I mean, there have been conflicts in the world before. But if you look today at the conflict in Ukraine, or you look at what's happening in Gaza and the Red Sea, it's actually affecting bread and butter issues in this country. Your petrol price goes up. Sometimes, fortunately, we are not a food importing country anymore, but we saw in Sri Lanka, for example, that, food prices went up, petrol prices went up. Generally, inflation goes up because of, again, we had, there are people here who are involved in international education. Now, we have today about 1.1, 1.2 million students studying abroad at any given time. So the moment there is conflict, the first question we ask ourselves is, okay, how many of our people are out there? Now, we've done, again, you look at the last few years, we had Operation Ganga in Ukraine, we had Operation Kaveri in Sudan, and people go to work today. COVID was for us an amazing experience to discover how many Indians are working abroad. And there in many of them are people whose jobs are abroad, but they live in India. Shipping, people in maritime shipping, airline staff, hotel staff, students. So the globalization of India today, it's important for us all to understand it, recognize it, worry about it sometimes, but also look at the opportunities in it. Now, why did I write the book? Partly I kind of write stuff. I mostly do my own, foreign ministers have to speak. So I had a long history of writing for other people. I thought I may as well write for myself now. So I do that. And then if you write, you have a natural desire to communicate. And when I looked at 10 years of Modi, and I asked myself, where were we in 2014? Where are we in 2024? And then I looked around saying, somebody needs to tell this story. And finally, after, looking around, I decided, okay, I'm probably the best guy to do it. And that's how we ended up here.
I think talking about the last decade, you've been foreign minister for 5 years, foreign secretary for 3, and before that, ambassador to US, and then 4 years in China. In some sense, you've been the transition figure from the previous decade to this decade. In your book, there is a chapter on the decade of transformation. So how would you sum up that transformation? And I think in many ways, what Anant was saying, the way the people see and think about India has changed. So what is it that you've done that's made a difference? Of course, it's an advertisement for yourself as well, but I think there is a real one as well.
No, look, it's not just an advertisement for me, I think in many ways, because I would say you are a kind of, obviously part of the ideas and conceptualization team. But if you are to have big change, you need that vision. You need that sense of, I am here, I'm going to go there, I'm capable of it, I can convince my people I can do this. And it's not just a, sort of simple vision of I need to be big and need to be great. I mean, it needs to be a vision which would, say, okay, my defense capabilities need to be here, my manufacturing needs to be there, my foreign trade needs to be here. I should prepare for the global workplace. I should build deep strengths. This should be my response to terrorism. That should be, if I'm challenged on the border, what I will do. So there's a whole sort of, I would say, almost a kind of a mindset out there. So one part of it is that, The second is the part we've already discussed, which is if we are, at the end of the day, we are 1.4 billion people, biggest resource is people. And we are preparing for a globalized world. Why am I not leveraging people? Why is it that, there are restrictions on mobility? People say we must have access to capital, we must have access to technology, to markets. They should have access, mobility should be part of the conversation as well. And then finally, there is this issue, which is, if you have aspirations, what we will be will depend on what we are and what we were. So there must be a sense of history. There must be, where am I coming from? What am I about? So it's in a sense revisiting the past, redoing the present, and preparing for the future.
And the way you do it, Dr. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why you're such a rock star in this popularity. I'm not just saying it to sort of praise you. I mean, there is a genuine kind of a rock star kind of a image that you have. Is when you talk about Indian foreign policy, you do it in a way that people feel good about India.
But I think people should feel good about India.
Of course. No, of course they should.
Look, things are happening. I mean,
of course.
Just think today. I mean, today you had testing of Agni 5. It's a big step. I mean, every day. I mean, I think 2 days ago you had the Sela tunnel. Every day something is happening in India. I mean, we used to think, we'll have a project, maybe 5 years, 10 years. I mean, many projects didn't even get off ground. Today, actually, what was promised is happening in the tenure, sometimes in the same tenure of the government. So we have changed and we should be proud of it.
Yeah. Is it because you had, if you look at the previous 30 years, I mean, since Rajiv Gandhi passed away, there is not a single government with a majority. So having a full majority, a leader who's got control over his own party, how much difference that's made to both the way the world sees us and the way we deal with the rest of the world?
Look, Raj, I definitely, I mean, no question, majority in a democracy, that too in a big country, a very pluralistic society with all the diversity we have. It is important at the end of the day of, that whole churning, which ends up in an election, produces a decisive outcome. No question about it, because we have seen the majority period and we have seen the coalition period, and I think nobody wishes a coalition on this country ever again. I think that's pretty obvious.
Even though the big reforms happened during a coalition government, a very weak coalition government.
No, I would say the big reforms actually have happened in the majority government.
Now,
what happened, if you are referring to 91-92,
yes.
91-92 was a reform which was done with our backs to the wall. Yeah. So we did the reforms we must. We didn't do the reforms we should. I mean, there were other things we should have done. But, by which time the consensus started fraying, the appetite to go further was not there. So I would say, yes, definitely majority government makes a difference. But I don't think it's as simple as that. I really think it, in a way, you need a kind of a vision, a leadership, which will motivate the country, which will get people to do more than normally, they would get out of their comfort zone. People would be willing to take risks, experiment with things. It requires, one of the good things about this government, the big changes I've seen over the last 10 years is actually the follow-up. That let me tell you, there's nothing more awkward in your career. This I'm talking not of my ministerial tenure, my secretary tenure. To be put in front of a whole lot of your peers and being hauled up by the Prime Minister saying, why didn't that get done? And what is your explanation for it? So what it does is, the moment the top demands accountability and gets after you saying, look, this was to be done, this is your cost overrun, this is your time overrun, you said at the last meeting this would happen. The moment you start getting that kind of follow through, I mean, it's like a business principle that any organization, if the leader is hands-on, the leader is demanding, the leader pushes himself or herself, let me tell you, it'll be a very different organization. And that's actually what's happened to this country.
From a foreign policy perspective, what is it for the third term, assuming you guys get a third term, and it looks like it's going to happen?
Well, thank you very much. I didn't doubt it.
Quite, what is it that you what is that big, bold kind of, we keep hearing big, bold news, new things. From a foreign policy perspective, what is that we should be looking forward to or expecting?
No, look, honest answer, at this time, I can't say it. I mean, not because I'm being discreet, because people are working on it. The idea really would be that, 10 years, we have come as far as we have. So what is it we should be doing bigger, better, differently, innovatively? And it's not just in foreign policy. I think every minister, every ministry today has that task. I would say we are well set up for it today. We are well set up for it today because if you look at the big challenges and opportunities of the last, let's say, 5 years, I would even say 10 years, we have made the most of it. Many other people had a chance to do G20. We just did it better than everybody else. So we made an impression on the world. There are, countries who have today, there's a big, I would say, a kind of a tech competition going on in the world. We are actually today harnessing it and saying, okay, this is a country with an IT industry, but this country should have a semiconductor industry. We have an old, antiquated semiconductor, facility in Chandigarh, which is decades old, very small. But, it doesn't behove a country like India to have that kind of antiquated small technology base. I mean, so you need to build a fab in this country. You must have your assembly testing plants. So if you take what will be to me the new direction of technology and of power, the balance of power today will be set in many ways by the balances of technology. We are moving into a world of artificial intelligence. In our lives, drones are going to be important. Space will be important. So, how do you do all this? But you also have to do the basics. You have to build your roads better. You have to build your railways. You have to create a good business environment, revive manufacturing in this country, which actually, when we talk about reforms, I really think after the 1990s, somewhere we let go of that. So there's a lot to be done at different levels.
If I might bring you to the politics of foreign policy, which has been lots of it in the country. I mean, take you back to the 2019 Ramnath Goenka lecture that you gave, in which you talked about the dogmas of Delhi. Right. See, normally we tend to believe everything we did in the past was fantastic. Indian foreign policy was always great. Everything was great that happened in the past. To one where you actually said, no, we got to take a critical look at the past, re-examine some of the things, the way we did things. And in your book, you talk about the three big foreign policy accounts, how we dealt with Pakistan and Kashmir, how we dealt with China, how we dealt with the US and the West. You're making propositions there which really challenge the entire conventional wisdom on Indian foreign policy and how we dealt with that. Could you just walk us through those three accounts? What has changed?
I mean, in a way, between book one and book two, I sort of developed this argument. In the first book, what I found working in the foreign ministry, at that time I would say I was kind of like an upper middle level guy, was there was a kind of a mantra, there's a conventional belief in the foreign policy system. But when we actually looked at public behavior, it was very different. you had, and at that time I used to deal with US. And actually, I think it was, if my memory serves me right, Jairam Ramesh's book, which was Yankee Go Home and Take Me With You. Huh? So, people would abuse the US and then want you to come and do something for them with the US. So what we found even during the nuclear deal, that whole period, was you had a very strong ideological kind of a prism coming from this I kind of dealt with it in my second book. So if one actually looked at the real indices, okay, where is your trade growing? Where is your technology coming from? Where is the mobility migration happening? Where are people going for education? Where are people going for tourism? What kind of movies do you watch? The whole direction went one way. The foreign policy was going a very different way. And so my point in that first book was, sometimes listen to the street. Get out of your own narrow circle and ask, real people of the real economy, saying, so what do you think about the world? Where do you think our chances are? Where is the opportunity there? And that I developed into something a little bit more wide-ranging in this book, because what I discovered as I, kept at my job was on very key issues. There were choices we made in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. We grew up believing, and all of us, I would include myself in it, that we grew up believing these were the only choices, these were the best choices. And, if anything happened in the world, it was other people's fault, it was never ours. And when you actually started examining the record with an open mind, you came up with something very different. And the three examples I picked in the chapter called Roads Not Taken in my book, one was with regard, and also in the China chapter, one was with regard to China. If you look at China, there was somehow this belief, everything was great till virtually the war came, and then it turned nasty, and the word was betrayed by the Chinese. Now, the reality was, almost from day one, you had people, and see, one of the dangers is you look back on history, and now you are smart because you have a retrospect, you know how history played out. But my interest was, at that time, what did people say? So if you are saying, okay, China, in 1950, you have the Deputy Prime Minister of India cautioning the Prime Minister, saying, look, for the first time, we have a two-front situation. We have dangers coming out of China. And he's brushed off, saying, in fact, I think the word is, we cannot imagine the Chinese undertaking a wild adventure across the Himalayas. Excuse me, that's exactly what they did in 1962. So now I take a second example, Pakistan. Today, by the way, CAA rules were notified. Now, I'm reminding you for a reason, because this debate goes back to the 1950s, that you have Shyama Prasad Mukherjee warning you publicly. This is the reason why he finds it difficult to continue the government, saying, you are dealing with a neighbor. You're reaching an understanding, saying, I'll look after my minorities, you look after yours. Your neighbor has no intention of doing it. And anybody who sort of has remote sense of objectivity about it can see it. That's the guy's DNA. That's what he's actually saying in public. You look at the flow of people coming out of Pakistan, and yet you go and conclude a pact, I don't know. The Liaquat, Nehru Liaquat Pact. So it's not like, our relationship, the Pakistan account going bad, again, was not a surprise. People told you in many cases, saying, beware, be careful, recognize what you are dealing with. Or the US. That, our relations with the US have been very rocky. Okay, no question about it. We frankly all grew up with the belief that US had some kind of, from the very beginning, had something against us. In fact, when you look at the record, There are enormous, ideological prejudices on our side. And within, again, the Indian political system, you have various ministers. I mean, in this case, Dr. Ambedkar. But if Dr. Ambedkar is a very interesting person because of all the first generation leaders. There may be somebody else who I may have missed out, but I think he was one of the few who's actually educated in America. And with that experience, Dr. Ambedkar actually, if you look at his speech in Parliament at a time when he's resigning, he's talking about a time when, he said, we started off, there's no reason for us not to, have good relations with America, but we have ended up alienating them. And you know the reason why we alienated them? Because, by the way, we are taking up China's cause. So just imagine the reality was, in many cases, you put China's interests ahead of India's interest. Today we are talking India first. Apparently, there was a period when it was China first, which I can understand in China, not in India. So if you actually, have irritate, I don't have a problem battling with others. I do it even now sometimes. But to do it, you must do it for your cause. You don't do it for other people, that too an adversary.
So would you welcome a debate today? So like just as Nehru made many mistakes, that some of the things you do today, we also need a debate on what are the likely consequences. You need someone asking deeper questions. When you get
That's what you guys are doing. No, but look, of course, I don't think, not just in foreign policy, I think it's in a democracy, government should be questioned, there should be debates, there are debates. In this country would not be this country if it didn't have debates. So I don't have an issue with that. What I have an issue with is everything is okay. If you question it, there's a political agenda, I don't have to join the BJP today to question what happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Ambedkar, Patel, Rajaji, Minu Masani, J.B. Kriplani all questioned it at that time. And with the passage of history, many of their questions and answers proved to be right. Not all of them. Again, I want to be clear. I'm not saying everything done in the past was wrong. I think many good things were done in the past. But we shouldn't have this very unquestioning acceptance of where we came from, because then it will not enable us to correct the mistakes today.
Looking at where we are going, you have one nice sentence in your book in terms of the major power relations. You talk about engaging America, managing China, reassuring Russia, cultivating Europe, and bring Japan into play. Can you expand on this? Each word you chose for the country kind of lays out the kind of special priority or how we deal with each one of them.
Yes, because I think in many ways with the US, now to use the Prime Minister's words, we have put the hesitations of history, the ideological reservations behind us. I think there's a world out there for us to explore, and you can see that. You saw that when Prime Minister went last year on the state visit to the US. And it is for us, I think, a very important trade partner, investment partner, but most of all, I would say technology partner. That's why I use the word out there. I'll skip China, Russia for a moment. I'll come back to them. For where Europe is concerned, again, in many ways, I think we were behind the curve. We were behind the curve in the sense that we focused on a few countries in Europe. The interface was relatively thin, and we didn't fully, utilize or comprehend the integration of Europe and the importance of Brussels. One of the big changes in our European policy in the last 10 years is really how much more time today we are spending in Brussels with Brussels. And again, Europe is going through its own process of change. And definitely there's no question, as it becomes strategically more aware and awake, that it will be a big factor in its own right. If one looks at resources, and again, one looks at technology, one looks at the partnership possibilities in Europe, and this is, as I say, this is the real world. This is where your technology is going. This is where your trade is going. This is where your mobility is going. These are the complementary partners of India. This is for us a very, very good fit. Where Japan is concerned, a lot of it is within Japan itself and between Japan and the world, which is Japan, for historical reasons, had constrained itself. So, as and when Japan gets more deeply into world politics, Japan is a great technology power. Japan has abilities and, impact. And we have seen it in our own country. I mean, we saw it in the automobile sector. We saw it in the mass transportation metro sector. When the bullet train happens, we are going to see a big technology leap out there. So the problem with Japan is, it is hesitant because of the past. There are a lot of reactions to what Japan wants to do. We are very unique because we have a very good history with Japan. So if anybody, if there's any big country which can actively encourage and welcome Japan to play a bigger role, I think we have a very natural choice there. Coming to Russia and China.
I'll just respond to interruption. So the three places you've said, it's our relationship with these three parts of the world are quite politics proof. No matter what happens in America, what happens in European politics, whatever happens in Japanese politics, it's not really going to make too much of a difference. We can't envision them making too much of a difference between India and those countries.
Yes, but there is still, I would not say there's an automaticity about it. You've got to work at it. It's not necessarily true that everybody would have that same commitment, same interest. Okay. So, in foreign policy, you can't take it as a given. Even good things need to be, every garden needs to be tended, even a nice garden.
Okay.
The Russia bit, see, for us, at the end of the day, most of all, Russia is geopolitical. You look at the map of the world, it stares you in the face. It's your neighbor's neighbor. There's a continental balance which is built in the geography of the situation. And the fact is, all said and done, if you look at the ups and downs, and that's why in the second book, I've spent some time explaining this about Russia, that if you look at Russia's relationship with almost every other major center, Russia, Europe, Russia, US, Russia, China, Russia, Japan, it's had tremendous ups and downs. There have been great periods, there have been very difficult periods. Ours has been from 1955, has actually been exceptionally stable, and which actually proves that geopolitical logic is a very firm logic shared at both ends. Now, once you have a logic, the issue for us is how do you explore the practical parts of it. Not historically, but I would say last 50, 60 years, for us, it's been largely what we call a military technical collaboration. But if we look today at the changing demands of the Indian economy, and you look at the change direction of Russia, a Russia which is turning away from the West, which is looking much more at Europe, then Asia, sorry. Then I think you are finding now a new basis really to deepen that relationship, and that is actually what is happening. And it's important why I use the word reassure, that the Russians have to be reassured that what is happening for us with the other accounts is not at their expense. So there is that part as well.
But how do you, see, because Russia is at war with Europe.
Yes.
It's at war with the West, collective West, what it says. So how do you do both improve relations with the West while also reassuring Russia? Because, and then Russia has also become a friend of China, which is our problem.
No, but Raj, we're doing it, aren't we? The proof of the pudding is actually in it being present on the table.
But if the next 2 years, if the conflict gets deeper in Ukraine,
No,
how are we?
That is really what diplomacy and foreign policy is about. If you're asking me, is that a challenge? Is that difficulties? Answer is yes. But because there are difficulties, I don't throw up my hands and say, "Oh, there's a big problem there. I can't do anything about it." But I think I would say today it is perfectly feasible for a power like India to have to work on multiple vectors, with different nations finding common connects and creating an agenda and doing it in a way, there'd be things here I wouldn't do because it would be going too far, or there are things there I wouldn't do because it would have consequences. So there is I would say, a moderation, a balance, a nuance out there with each relationship, which makes it palatable for others. So if you go whole hog, I mean, full speed on every one of them with no guardrails, or then yes, then managing multiple vectors becomes difficult. But if you do it with a certain amount of deliberation and judgment, then I think it is doable. And as I said, I mean, we are actually demonstrating it in real life. And that really leaves the last one, which is China. And
One
why
exception to the general good relations.
yeah, for China, the real problem is they are changing, we are changing. How do you find an equilibrium?
So actually, it's interesting. You say they're changing, we're changing. The fact that Russia politics doesn't really exist. I mean, it's quite a stable political regime, and even the elections now is, we all know how that kind of end up at. So does that helps us to? I mean, the stability with the Russia-India relationship.
No, look, I mean, I wouldn't go as far as you do. I mean, you've had changes of regime in Russia. After all, you had 91, 92, you had a Yeltsin period. So before that, you had, even within the Soviet system, a Gorbachev period. So it's not, every country has its politics.
Yeah.
But
it'll never be a Maldives, right? You're never going to have like warring sort of two sides, trying to put, you know what I mean? Like it's quite clear where Russia's.
no, unless climate change becomes very extreme, I don't see Russia becoming. So, but the look, I think in the Russian statecraft sort of how would I say heritage, there is a kind of a sense of what India is about and what are the benefits of a relationship with India, just as it is in ours. And we have therefore made that effort. It's not like we don't agree on everything. There are issues on which we have differences, but we have figured out how to deal with it.
Can you just share anything you can tell us about Modi and Putin's relationship? Because we keep hearing about it. There's something that looks very special about their equation and the chemistry.
And the reports that you contributed to keeping things calm when things were going bad in 22.
What's a little bit different here was after the first, in 2014, President Putin came here. Okay, I was in the US as ambassador. 2015, Modi ji and Putin met in Ufa in summer of 2015. After that, I think they decided that the relationship, the best way is actually to deal with each other directly, rather than what you normally see, long table. I mean, we also do that long table stuff. But they actually started spending a lot of time directly talking one-on-one. So what has happened over a period of time, if two leaders have developed that ability to continuously converse. And interestingly, we've also kept it up. It's one relationship where from time to time there are teleconversations as well. So I would say the personal connect there has definitely helped the relationship, because sometimes in very tricky situations, you are able to get through, you are able to talk, you are able to make a point. And sometimes if you say something, the other person, because if you and I get along, we've known each other for some time, you're more likely to listen. On what you said, Vas, Raj, look, since the Ukraine conflict began, at various points of time, different countries or different actors or different organizations have asked us to pitch in with something, you know. Some of it we have made public, some of it we have not. I've spoken, for example, about the Black Sea grain corridor, or about when the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant was under attack. So there have been issues. At this time, our effort, because, we really, for us, this conflict is not, is not representative of this era. This is for us something with which, we have a profound A democracy is a democracy is perfectly capable of doing it if it is led by the right people.
Yeah.
So
It's a great churn of the last 20 years growth, which is not fully understood by outsiders.
no, it is that, what has happened in this country. I mean, nobody, look, let's look at India today. If you look today at, say, the parliament, okay, I give that, or look at the corporate sector, look at any workplace, nobody would doubt we are more representative than we have ever been before, at least in living history. Okay, many more people from humbler backgrounds, smaller towns, self-made people have come up in our country. Now, they have brought with them what is authentic India. They have brought their heritage, their beliefs, their traditions. They do not believe that something which one generation of people picked up in Cambridge should become their ideology and their guiding beliefs. They also believe that what they picked up in Nashik or in Coimbatore or in Dibrugarh or in Jalandhar is equally valid. So there is today, in a sense, an old order, new order, which is, I would argue, is because democracy has deepened in this country.
Yeah.
And a lot of people abroad don't like it because they want you to be, as I said, a poor cousin of themselves. They want you to be something like them so that they are continually in a position to dominate. They don't like the pushback.
And you said this in the book, and I can just kind of, you said that there are a lot of people abroad who don't want India to be strong.
That's also true.
So I mean, who doesn't want India to be strong? I mean, who like is it China? Is it?
Come on,
Is it?
I think that much you should be able to figure out.
But it's both our friends and enemies. I mean, you're hinting at both of them.
No, look, life is competitive. Okay. To some degree, all of us compete with each other. But what happens in foreign policies, even with people you compete, you find common interest. I think there are many friends in the world who would wish us well, who want us to become stronger. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the world is out. I'm not paranoid. In fact, I'm very optimistic. I would say a very large part of the world wishes us well because for, much of the global south, for example, they see in us a kind of a motivation. They see in us a vindication of a kind. So when something good happens in India, I can genuinely see, in other parts of the world, people welcome it. And whereas there would also be other powers with whom there would be an interest, and for them, a stronger India is part of a global balance or a global order or a global partnership. So it's not like everybody is out to get us or to slow us down. There would be some, there would not be some. There would be some who would be partly there, who would help us in some areas, but not in some areas. It's very granular. It's very, very
So
nuanced.
one question, one of the things you talk about in your book is really how India's attitude to globalization changed fundamentally. In some ways, simultaneously as the US changed its attitude. So the rearranging, we walked out of the RCEP, the Asia-wide free trade agreement. Now we're signing agreements with other countries, including with Europe, last couple of days. So how do you see this process of rearranging? We all believed in 91, there's only one model of growth. Now you're saying there is a different way of doing globalization. We call it reglobalization, deglobalization.
Well, I think what happened from the 1990s was that in the production and thereafter technology started moving in a certain, resulting in concentration of it. Okay. Countries, elites, people, strategic people knowingly did this. Okay. They did it maybe out of miscalculation. They may have done it out of benefit, whatever the issue. But the fact was, after 30 years of this model of globalization, we ended up in a situation where a large part of the world, not just India, in fact, many countries much more than us, a large part of the world everything becomes concentrated somewhere, other people start to lose their jobs. What has been the damaging impact on small and medium enterprises by dumping of goods? A small manufacturer in India cannot fight a massive state-owned subsidized production. And there is enormous, I want to say this to you because I deal a lot with small industry. I even lived for a large part of my life in an estate in Noida. You have to hear the sentiments of those people out there. So when you heard this globalization mantra, oh, it's great for our growth, etc. Yes, it may be great for those people whose livelihoods are not at stake. So it may be great economic theory. Let me tell you, right at the grassroots, there are large number of people in every country who are hurting because of the way goods are being dumped on us, who find it difficult to compete, who do not know what to do when non-market economy actually uses a WTO market system.
One question, I think Anand has a lot of very quick questions, but I wanted one big change in the last decade is the role of the private sector, both within the country where you brought, today private sector is into the defense, into space, there's some privatization that has taken place. Historically, we've tended to suppress the role of the private sector in the conduct of foreign policy within, not only in our own economy. Today, you see, if you want to do projects outside, the need to have your private sector empowered to be able to do projects outside. How serious are you going to see more of that in the second term, third term?
Look, I spoke about, when I was talking about the key relationships, the US relationship, and spoke about the ideological prism. I think it was that very same prism which actually led to license Raj, which led to the constraints on business in this country, and which stifled innovation. We were just talking to a major entrepreneur in this country who, when he was questioned about research, why doesn't business invest in research? He said, well, first you guys put us in a box where we're not allowed to produce beyond a point, and we sell everything we produce. Now, if you sold everything you produce, why would you do research? Because you have no reason to. So today, I think we've freed ourselves up from a lot kind of baggage. Now, if you want, innovation, you are looking today at a kind of an leapfrog, really, because this country cannot grow, others grew before us. We have today to latch on to those big opportunities, so semiconductor, renewable, green tech, clean tech, drone, space. These are all great opportunities out there because it's a relatively, the supply chains are not fully set, there is today for new players. And encourage that. We encourage it at home through startup and, by skills, first of all, by startup, by innovation, by supporting a lot of this, making it easier to do business, but also making it easier to innovate. But abroad, part of what, in fact, in MEA we do is we actually give lines of credit for projects abroad, which are executed by Indian companies with a very high. And in many cases, we have seen a company which goes in, does one good project, has now established itself, it has got market access, it's got branding in that country. Now they're ready to go out there. So we are today in different ways, directly, indirectly, promoting this, because at the end of the day, this means more employment for us at home.
It used to be said, what's good for General Motors is good for the US. Is there the Indian capital? Are you really, not one is MSME, small LOCs, but in terms of the big projects, empowering Indian capital really to go out and do things?
Well, yes, but I think, we have a much more diversified sort of economic landscape. Our companies are not that level. But definitely, we would, we had a very interesting example just recently when Prime Minister went to UAE. My colleague Piyush Goyal actually negotiated something called Bharat Mart with DP World, where DP World today provides a platform in Dubai for small Indian businesses to display their wares. so that people from across Africa or the Arab world can come and make their decisions. So we do a lot, there's a lot of innovative stuff which is happening. It could be big companies, it could be smaller people, it's trade, it's technology collaborations. But I would also say Indian businesses are responding. I mean, there are places, I went last year, our trade with Latin America today is $45 billion. There are places where Indian businesses are there and no Indian foreign minister has ever gone there before. It tells you a lot.
There is America has been incredible agent for their businesses. I mean, do you see that kind of intimacy happening with India also? Like, when you'll actually, Boeing or Google and these companies, it becomes part of the American sort of,
No, look,
delegation.
I think Anant, India will be India. I mean, we have a certain culture, we have a certain, our sense of propriety, etc. But I would say we will be, to me, I'm not actually supportive of business per se. I'm supportive of my employment. Our business is only the way by which I get that employment.
Okay.
I get that GDP increase.
Yeah. We spoke a lot about the big countries and the big power centers of the world, but just a quick one on the neighborhood. It's not been as rosy as as the rest of the world has been for you. Would you accept that? Or
For no country is the neighborhood ever rosy.
okay,
It's the nature of the neighborhood.
Nobody loves the neighbors.
Ask anybody.
okay,
So, but you have to accept the ups and downs, the politics of the neighborhood, the sometimes the psychology of the neighborhood.
okay.
And in our case, what had happened was, post-partition, you actually have this big country, India, at the center, and a number of smaller countries. So what we have tried to do in the last decade is to recognize that as a fact, not fight it, not tell neighbors, I will only do this much because you haven't done that much. So we consciously said, look, irrespective of their capability, their willingness, their decisions, let's make up our mind what is good for the relationship. So if you look at the last decade, I would actually point to a very fundamental transformation on the ground. Very obvious examples today would be, say, fuel pipelines which go to Bangladesh and Nepal, where countries which used to get their fuel by trucks or by shipping today have assured fuel from India at a time when energy security is a very big concern for people. Or the fact today we are seeing much more transnational power grids, that we supply power to Nepal, we import from Nepal, we supply to Bangladesh, we supply to Myanmar. We are talking today of a grid across the sea with Sri Lanka. Okay, we do with Bhutan as well.
Yeah.
You can see it in rail. You can see railway lines today to many of our neighbors. Nepal, certainly Bangladesh. We are actively looking at a rail line today to Bhutan. You can see it in roads. You can see it in the actual business and traffic between us. And when crunch time comes, because that's really in many ways the test. During COVID, we were the source of vaccine to many of them. A lot of them had issues like fertilizer shortages during when the Ukraine conflict started. And most of all, the neighborhood has registered that while, the rest of the world was, watching cautiously and the IMF was moving at its own pace, as Sri Lanka was plummeting, it was actually India which came to help. So I think that message is registered loud and clear in the neighborhood.
The border issues. We hear that there were offers made in the past from China's side to resolve. In the past, I think Manmohan Singh's time, then Vajpayee's time. Is there any scenario where you think third term, fourth term, whatever, but is there any scenario you think that this can actually be resolved?
No, any country involved in a boundary dispute, negotiating it, has to believe eventually that there'll be a solution. But that solution has to be a fair solution.
And will you feel more empowered to take a big step like that with more seats and less, like compared 300 versus 400 seats? Does that make a difference at all?
Sorry. To me, the territory of India and the fairness of a boundary solution has nothing to do with how many seats there are.
But the decisiveness...
Either it's a good deal or it's not a good deal. Either it is something which is India's right. This is not the issue today.
Yeah.
Is not whether you have the political majority or not. It is whether there is actually a fair deal on the table.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Quickly on Pakistan, can we start a conversation? If they reach out, would we be open to a conversation? Who do you talk to in Pakistan if you have to have a conversation?
No, you see, again, look, we have never closed our doors to talking with Pakistan. Question is, what is it you talk about? I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, if some guy has that many terrorist camps dedicated to, training people who come over with the sole intention of making your life difficult, I mean, surely that should be the central point of the conversation.
Okay. But would you be open to a conversation with the military?
No, see, again, it doesn't quite work that way. It's not like you choose between this and that. I mean, governments talk to governments. The military is also part of the Pakistani government. So it's not like you're talking to the Pakistani military and not talking to the Pakistani civilian. It's for them to settle their issues.
At this point, they have preconditions. At this point, they put preconditions for a dialogue.
Well, they were the people who withdrew the High Commissioner. Yeah. So we were not, we were not the people. And as I said, we have never closed our doors to talking to Pakistan, but we do not want to put the terrorism issue must be fair, square at the center of the conversation, because it is the major issue in the relationship. Yeah. I'm not saying there are not other issues, but I'm not going to duck that issue for the sake of talking to them.
Of course. Okay. So rapid fire. Have some fun with it. I couldn't control myself. I've got like 25 questions, so I'll kind of just see how we go and see how fast how rapidly we're able to answer these, and how much. I can't ask you to have a lot of fun with all of those questions, but the ones that you think you can have fun with, please have fun with. And then we get to some audience questions. India or Bharat, which name would you prefer your host country uses to introduce you on your next official visit?
Bharat.
Okay. Popular answer. Kabul, Ukraine, Vande Bharat, Sudan. Which was the more stressful evacuation for you?
Tough one, because each one had its own moments of anxiety. I would say it's honestly a tough one. In each case, we've actually had firings. People were that close to something bad happening.
Shubhajit was one of them. In Kabul, Shubhajit, our reporter, was one of the people who was ducking bullets.
In Kabul, getting people to the airport was the big challenge. In Sudan, collecting them because they were spread out everywhere was the big challenge. In Ukraine, actually moving them from east of Ukraine to the west of Ukraine, because there were two cities, Kharkiv and Sumy, where there was actually fighting going on. So I would say all of them are equally stressful.
Okay. The one lesson American diplomats can learn from Indian diplomats.
Speak better English.
You can't give an answer. You can't give the same answer for the next question. The one lesson Chinese diplomats can learn from Indian diplomats.
Be nice to Indians.
The one lesson Indian foreign policy can learn from American foreign policy.
I won't give you a flippant answer, because actually I think still in many ways, how to be a global power is something which is enormously complicated.
Does that entail does that entail allowing every professor to come in for every seminar in India?
Well, I think you know the answer.
Okay. So your first book made lots of references to the Mahabharata. This one, I enjoyed all the references to Ramayana, and some you made reference to both. So now I want you to imagine you're living in a utopian time where all characters of Mahabharata and Ramayana are walking on the earth. Now, you have the magical ability to request both Hanuman and Sri Krishna, one who, I'm quoting from the book, performs his duties undaunted by any obstacles, and the other a master strategist and source of wisdom at difficult moments. Who would you send to which country to fix our relationship with?
I would give them like a global contract. I would say, look, you are capable of fixing everything. Do it, because each one has a different strength.
Okay, I'm going to list some countries down, and I think you can. I'll try to push for an answer. Okay, so let's first say between Pakistan and China, who would you send to which country?
I would probably send Hanuman to Pakistan and Sri Krishna to China.
Who would you send to Maldives? Who would you send to Sri Lanka? Who would you send to Nepal?
No, I wouldn't. I would give them a global contract, but
Okay.
I wouldn't overtax them.
See.
Yeah.
Which abbreviation do you think has the most potential and which is the most challenging to get off ground? I2U2, that's India, Israel, UAE, USA. The second abbreviation is IMEC, Indo-Middle East Europe Economic Corridor. Third abbreviation is SAGAR, Security and Growth for All in Region. Fourth abbreviation is IPOI, Indian Pacific Oceans Initiative. And the fifth is not an abbreviation, but just go with it, Quad.
I first of all, I like this whole concept of abbreviations because it sticks in people's minds.
Okay.
You tell people today, Sagar, everybody knows what you mean. I like Sagar because it actually ended up as a word, So now, Sagar was actually the Prime Minister's idea. In the case of I2U2, I must tell you, it started as a joke. We were four of us. Two of us were on ground and two of us were on screen. And when we met for the first time, and then the issue came up, so what should we call ourselves? So I joked saying, I2U2, and it was a partly U2 music kind of joke. And I was very surprised the next time we met that the officials sort of took it up seriously, and it acquired real life. I like Quad for this reason. It makes it very clear that stays at 4.
Okay, fair. But which was the most challenging to get off the ground?
IMEC, we are still IMEC, I2U2 very early. But in the case of Quad, remember, a decade ago, 2017 was the second time. We first attempted it in 2006, 2007. In 2007, and it didn't work. It didn't work because I think the 4 countries, they didn't talk enough among themselves. Maybe they didn't, frankly, have enough faith in each other. So when you have not succeeded on something, that's a bit of it's like facing a bowler after you got out the last time. You're a bit super cautious there.
Fair.
So I think there was initially concern in 2017 whether Quad would really smoothly take off. And we have surprised even ourselves by how well we have done in the last 7 years.
Super. Okay. RRR, Uri, 370, Kerala Files, Kashmir Files. Which film do you think helped bring Bharat's perspective out more?
That's an unfair question to ask me only because I haven't seen some of them.
Fine.
But I did like RRR a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned RRR in the book, so I thought.
Not just for the dancing.
Yeah, okay. The one thing that excites you about a possible second Trump presidency, the one thing that concerns you about a second Trump presidency?
Let us see what happens in November.
Climate change doesn't concern you about it? Like, I think that's like one thing that everybody's talking about, that if Trump comes back, all the climate sort of commitments
I don't
will
think
be...
climate change would change between now and November. Let's wait till November.
Okay. Space, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, textiles, manufacturing, agriculture, human resources. Which will be the biggest leverage for India?
I would say in a 10-year time frame, space and semiconductors.
Okay. What's the one
How
thing
many
that
questions you have there?
I've got a few. By the way, all the extra are the ones that Raja told me not to ask. So um, I'm going to try a few. What's the one thing that needs to happen for Israel-Hamas war to end?
It's a tough one. I would honestly pass up on this.
Okay. And what's the one thing that needs to happen for Ukraine-Russia war to end?
I would pass
Pass
up.
on that.
No,
Okay,
look.
fair.
I think in a way, eventually, in the case of Ukraine, Russia, somewhere the parties have to come to the conclusion that they would like to, that they want to end the conflict.
And India has offered to help, but but it's not sort of.
Look, a lot of countries at different points of time, even the UN, even Guterres
Yeah.
has offered, but it's a constant. I mean, there's a constant discussion on this.
Who is going to be the one who invites? Both parties have to invite, or will America have to invite?
No. At this time, we don't know. Remember, they were talking for some time after the conflict began.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
Belarus and then in Turkey.
Okay. The one thing that's changed in Indian government's dealing with Pakistan over the past 10 years, and one thing that stayed the same.
I would say what has changed is the clarity about responding to terrorism. One thing which has changed, remained the same, is the reality of the fact that they are a neighbor.
Okay. The one lesson you would advise the Indian Prime Minister to learn from China's faltering economy.
No, if I gave advice to the Prime Minister, I'm not going to give you that insight.
Okay. Last few. Which will make you happier, rising on the ease of doing business index or VDEM's democracy index?
I mean, one is a serious one in the real world. The other one, the less said, the better.
Okay, all right. In the third term, if there's a third term, the first summit the Prime Minister should do would be with whom? Okay, who would you invite to the third term? Who would you invite for the swearing in? No?
Can't answer that.
Okay. Okay, I think this has been a fun rapid fire. I mean, I think you've tried to play as best as you can given your position, so I appreciate all of that. I have skipped a few. Should I try one more?
Okay, I think we can move on.
Fine. Okay, I'll ask you one last bit. Is there one thing you regret in your professional career? One thing that stands out as something that you kind of regret?
No, I honestly wouldn't say that, because I know that every career, there'll always be some place
Benefit of
you say,
hindsight, etc.
I would have liked to do a posting there. But you also know that any choice you made would have been at the expense of any other choice. So I think I had a representative sample. It was a good career. It did offer different jobs, worked with a lot of interesting people in interesting places. So no regrets.
Super. So before we go to the audience, what's the next book about?
Thinking about it, but I would say, and I'm not sure I am personally capable of that effort, so I might make it a larger effort. I'm very troubled by the fact that that one part of the world, or maybe more than one part of the world, actually is so unaware about our strategic traditions and thinking, etc. So to me, I would like actually to kind of create a primer plus on Indian strategic traditions. What has been our history? How do we think about it? What have been the historical situations? So I've used the epics as a sort of lens in a way, but I would like to make a much more serious effort and present it to the world, because I see with other cultures and civilizations that the Westerners would put forward something which they would say over the last 2,000 years. This is how, from the Greeks onwards, this is how we've evolved, or the Chinese may do that. I feel, and I know it is there. It's there in bits and pieces in people's minds, etc. But I would definitely like, as I said, it's not something I may be able to do on my own, but I would definitely like to lead an effort today to put together what this country's history of statecraft and strategic thinking is about. Because as we become bigger, I think it's important we'll have to offer more explanations and narratives and ideas to the world. And it's important for the world really to know who we are, because I think today that's one of the big issues. These kind of indexes that you're talking about, these are made by people who have no understanding what India is about.
Yeah.
So when people pass judgment about a society without knowing the basics of that society, I think it's incumbent on us in a way to educate, to narrate, to put something out there. And that's really what I'm.
You think, when we opened a temple in Middle East, it was a beautiful temple. I saw, a very close friend of mine took photo inside, etc. Is that also something that, is that in a way foreign policy happening?
Well, yes. It was something which came out of Prime Minister's visit in 2015. And it is in many ways, to me, reflective of that relationship and a statement. Here is the UAE also saying something about India.
Yeah.
So when we talk about globalization, there should also be globalization of cultures, of faiths, of beliefs, of traditions, of heritage. So I felt very good about it.
No, it was a big deal. We all felt good.
But I felt good about it even frankly, from a foreign policy perspective. That to me, it said something about the depth of that relationship, that a project like this could happen. And I take my hats off to the UAE leadership.
Would you hesitate to put more such things in foreign policy agenda, or do you think it's perfectly?
No, I don't. I won't hesitate, because it may be something new and contemporary. But I would even say, there are. I don't know if you've been to Angkor Wat or to Mison. I mean, there are places in India, places in the world where the Indian footprint, the Indian civilizational imprint has been there for years. And we ourselves, many of us have forgotten it. I don't think younger generation necessarily knows that.
Yeah.
And at a time when a country is making its sort of presence felt in the world, one part of it is how do we look, as I said, it's the present and the future. One part of it is also the past. I would like to remind the world about who we were and what did we do in the past and how did we affect their lives, so that this time around, they know in a way that there is a past on which I'm building.
Super. I just can't stop talking to you, but I have to go to the audience, because at some point, I would love to keep going for hours more. So we've got a few people who are ready. Can we get the Australian High Commissioner, Philip Green, please, to start with the question? Yes.
Good evening, Dr. Jaishankar, and thank you very much. Can I first of all, you were asked about the countries which weren't perhaps enjoying so much India's rise as a global power. Can I just inscribe Australia on the list of those who are quite satisfied with India's surprise?
I never doubted that.
But can I ask you a question about that? The world is accommodating itself to an India that's more influential, but how is that affecting India? And will a more influential and powerful India be a different India? Will power change India?
I would say part of how is that affecting India is precisely the reason I wrote the book, which is as I travel around, I go to a lot of universities, to meetings of professional organizations, and I see today in tier 2, what we call tier 2, tier 3 cities, even places, smaller than that, how much interest there is today about foreign policy. Some of it is because we have a larger presence. Some of it is also the nature of technology, that the world is there in your palm, thanks to the smartphone. So it's important, and it's actually with that calculation we approach G20, that we wanted to use G20. One half of it was let the world see places in India which they normally don't see. But the other part is let the people of India see it in a way as a larger shared enterprise. And it exposes them to the debates of the world and what G20 is actually about. So your question, will India change by its rise? Absolutely. Every society changes as it rises. But I would very much hope that that change would be in a greater understanding, greater sense of responsibility, more contributions. That, if you have, already we tried, for example, to do more first responder operations at times, become a bigger source of ideas. That, if there is today a sustainability debate or a climate change debate or a digital debate or an AI debate, give your ideas in that, try and shape the outcome. So I do think we are going in that direction.
Can we, we've got about 8 questions, so we'll try to, I'll take maybe two together, yeah. Can we get from Mr. KK Garbal and Anil Sumani, both please, right here? Yeah, please keep the question a little bit short, a little short of time.
Sir, I'm KK Agarwal, President of South Asian University. India has made a lot of progress in the last 10 years, and our knowledge economy was just in the infancy when we established 2 international universities in India. In our last G20 presidency, further focus on Vasundhara Kutumbakam has been done. I just wanted to find out, with our knowledge economy concept taken so early and with this renewed focus, how do we take it forward in the context of India's rising in the subcontinent and global south? Thank you very much.
Yeah, Anil, please go ahead.
Sir, Anand has been referring to you as a rock star. So with the elections coming in, first is a personal question. Are you thinking of fighting the Lok Sabha elections? 2.5 million followers on social media and a rock star minister. Are you thinking of fighting the Lok Sabha elections and making it 401? The more important question is that so we've seen America getting weakened as an influencer in the Israel war. We've seen Russia getting weakened with this Ukraine war, and China flexing its muscles, and India coming up as the 4th pillar. What do you see as the global order going forward, the geopolitical global order going forward?
We take Akshay also, we get 3 together.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for the evening. My name is Akshay Chaturvedi. I run a company called Leverage EDU. We help students build global careers. Very small question. I think Anand summed it up really well. You're helping Indians feel very proud about a foreign policy. What would be your message for the hundreds of millions of students and Indians living abroad? How can they really contribute towards nation building in the next half of the decade?
My first, the response about knowledge economy and universities. We are today, there's a very strong connect between education, economy, and foreign policy. Because we are moving today to an era where, if you see, demographics will be a big factor, skills and talent will be a very big factor, and the ability to move ahead in different domains, particularly these new tech domains, would be very much dependent on that. So overall, I would say it is to our advantage that we have more universities, we have more colleges, we have more skilled and technical people, but we also have international agreements which will facilitate their mobility, and I've seen particularly last 2 years, much more interest in the rest of the world in concluding such mobility agreements. We've done with Australia, we've done with Germany, we've done with Austria, with Italy, and this innovation, AI, new tech era that I'm talking about, I think it's going to create a big churn really in the global workplace. Now, your question, what does it mean for a university? It clearly means that the international universities, the 2 of them, need to function, much more effectively You have just taken charge of Sao. So I know that's a challenge that you have on your hands. But it also means for us the new education policy. And, I think you will see that unfolding. The idea that we have today collaborative campuses, we have double degrees, we have students going out, we have universities coming in. So I think you're going to see some changes in the educational scene, which will prepare itself in a way for this new era. On the global order question, because I don't think standing for Lok Sabha is relevant to the global order, so I will put that question aside. On the global order, what do I see? I actually see, in a way, the natural diversity of the world reassert itself. You have roughly today 200 odd countries in the world. Many of them are, you can say there'll be, let's take even G20 as an example. It will not be an exhaustive example, but if you take even G20 as an example, every one of the G20 countries in some form today has an independent position, has an influence. Now, some of them have a history, they're part of an alliance, many of them are not. Even those who are part of an alliance, the nature of alliances itself is changing. So I see a much more diverse world where there are many more powers. Many issues will be more regionally settled. Not necessarily every issue will not go up to the global league. You will have these relationships on on specific issues. Some countries will work more closer than other countries. So that's, and to me, that's good. And not just good, to me, that's natural. That's the way the world was meant to be. What we have seen for the last 200, 300 years is a distortion, where a few countries were able to dominate others and marginalize them. So nature is now returning, history is returning today to the global order. And I think we are very much part of that process. Message to students, I actually literally have one message, which is wherever I go, because that's the experience of what happened in Ukraine. It's very important for students to actually think of what happens if something goes wrong. It's not in their nature. When, I don't know what you are like, I'm sure when any of us were 20 or 20 minors, we didn't worry about, but the world has many possibilities, and it's good when students go out and explore that. But that world also has, a downside. And we really struggled when the Ukraine conflict happened to actually even map out, who was there, what was happening. Today, it's possible to do that very easily digitally. But we want students in many ways to, to get the best out of that society where they say. Because I find in many cases, I go back to my own postings where I've seen very smart students who have done very well in those particular places.
Can we get from Rashmi a quick comment? And then we've got a couple of diplomats.
So as per the perception, India gives preferential treatment to the US vis-a-vis Russia. And yeah, so as per the perception, India is giving the preferential treatment to US vis-a-vis Russia, and that is what is getting Russia to cozy up with China, and India is losing a space where...
It's not what I heard in Moscow.
All right, but this is as per the perception, so that's all what I was wanting to know, that's creating a new world order, China and Russia, which actually doesn't really... all right.
I get your question.
Okay. Mr. Rajiv Bhatia here,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you very much. No preface, Mr. Only question. What is happening in Myanmar? Does it cause some concern, or do you feel it requires some policy adaptation?
We take these two and then we go to the diplomats.
No, let's be...
Three? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. The Chinese political counselors here? Yeah, sir, please.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I have many chances to listen to your insights. And I think tonight China figured prominently in this discussion. So I want to take this chance to have a very brief observation about China's position on China-Indian relations, because we consider China and India are the largest, most populous country in this world and important neighbors. And our leaders have reached important consensus that both countries should be development opportunities instead threats to each other. And we are partners instead of rivals to each other. So our common interest far outside our differences. So you have in many occasions talked about that China and India, who are rising at the same time, should find a way to handle each other. May I know that the basic tenure of your envisaged way of how India-China relations should develop? And by the way, may I have a very short answer to Mr. Anand's question that China wants India to succeed. And China and India, we are both members of Global South. And if China and India both succeed, it means that 1/3 of the world population will enjoy a better life. And it means a more multipolar and democratic international relationship. And Chinese people are very friendly to Indian people. So we welcome more Indian people to visit China to experience our friendship. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I was trying to provoke an answer. I wasn't really suggesting one. Yeah, we have 3 more after this.
Okay, that's the last, right?
3 after this.
Oh, okay. So, look, if Russia and China have become closer, that's not an issue. I mean, that's not a doing of India. That may or may not be a consequence of the situation in which Russia finds itself vis-a-vis the West. So the part I would dispute from your question is that somewhere India's policies towards the US has had some impact on Russia's policies towards China. I don't think that's not a correlation I would agree with. I think our policies towards Russia have been very objective, they've been very fair, and I think they've been regarded like that in Russia. And I can certainly say that's the sense I had from President Putin. On Myanmar, frankly, developments in Myanmar are worrying because what we are seeing is really more and more parts of Myanmar today not, being under some, not under an official authority, and different ethnic armed organizations are taking over. But more than that, the fighting itself is creating issues for us. It has actually come to our borders, that we have an inflow of people as a result of that. It is, and when authority collapses, it's not so much that we are taking sides. If there is no central authority and you have a very fractured system, then all sorts of other problems happen. It creates a fertile ground for a host of illegal activities, which then also impinge on our interests. So if you ask me, am I concerned about Myanmar? I would say honestly, very much. And do I feel something different needs to be done than what it is done, not just by us, but by everybody else? I would say yes. I think, reiterating what was an agreed position is not an answer to the direction of events which are today taking place in Myanmar. Regarding, what you said about, a colleague from China, I think it's in our common interest that we should not have that many forces on the line of actual control. I think it's in our common interest that we should observe agreements that we have signed. And I believe today, it's not just in common interest. I believe it's in China's interest as well, that this tension that we have seen for the last 4 years has not served either of us well. So the sooner we resolve it, I genuinely believe it's good for both of us. And I'm still, very much committed to finding a fair, reasonable outcome, but one which is respectful of agreements, which recognizes the line of actual control, which doesn't seek to change the status quo, that I think would be good for both of us.
The Juan Angli, the Chilean ambassador, and then we'll ask Alba from Scanray, please. Chilean ambassador, sir? Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, Minister. Thank you all the time. It's a great pleasure to hear to you. My question is a little bit on the different line as on the Global South and Voices of the Global South. I wanted to know if there is any views on the continuation of India being itself as a voice of Global South or Global South countries. You did the 2 Voices of the Global South summits in the past using the platform of G20. This year is Brazil, next year will be South Africa, I think, but countries also that have aspirations to be permanent members of the Security Council. So I would like to know if that was one-year experience, what you are planning for the future, in coordination with other presidencies of the G20 maybe, or not. What is your thoughts about that, please? Thank you.
Can we get Mr. Jetmalani also a mic here? We get 3 questions. Yes.
I was a little reluctant to ask you a question, being a die-hard camp follower of yours, but I have to, particularly in the light of what Anand asked. It's about China. And so notwithstanding the fact that we have the sentiments of the gentleman from China there, my question is, China has proved that it is no respecter of international law. Our own experience is that although we have a 1993 and 1996, they have not honored it. Now, sir, 2 questions that follow from this. First, if you care to share it, in your engagements with your counterpart, Wang Yi, what is his response whenever you place these boundary agreements to him and their flouting of it? And secondly, sir, what is, to use your delightful phrase, the Krishna course to dealing with China?
Last, Mr. Alba, please keep it short if you can. We're already beyond injury time.
Honorable Minister, the China +1 sitting next to him is a coincidence, but moving a lot of semi-skilled labor into India and high-tech. Either there is an immigration to other countries, or there is a possibility that in the next 10 years we will have a lot of semi-skilled jobs coming to India and skilled jobs migrating out of the country. And like many countries that have done, can we have a special visa possibility for highly skilled scientists from Eastern Europe and countries where there's a huge synergy that can happen? And
Mr. Alba, if you don't mind, he's very short of time.
Okay.
I can add a question of dual citizenship to that question if you want to bring it up. No, the idea of dual citizenship, I mean, we've been kind of struggling.
Okay. One voice of the Global South. You know, in my travels in the last year and a half, we did the first summit in January last year, and the second one in November. I've actually seen this idea has got a lot of traction. I mean, it's interesting in different countries. I've had my counterparts or others ask me, so, what will happen now? Will you be doing the next one? Because I think given the state of the world, it was important to provide a platform where a very large number of countries who otherwise felt they were not getting a fair hearing actually come together. And there is a certain strength, a collective strength in their coming together. This year, for example, we're going to have the Summit of the Future in the United Nations. It's going to be a very important summit. So I would say, the concerns of the South continue. It doesn't matter who holds the G20 presidency. The South still gets a raw deal on many issues and needs to keep flagging it and keep trying to better its lot. We haven't exactly taken a call on this, but I have certainly reported to the Prime Minister that there is such a strength of sentiment across different countries and different regions. On the, Maheshji, on your issues, look, I've known my counterpart for many years from the time I was ambassador there. So the present phase of ties, which we have been, constantly in touch. In fact, even on the morning after the Galwan incident, he was the person I spoke to. And it has been my endeavor by engaging him to see, because there are at the ground level, there are military commanders talks going on where we also have diplomatic representatives. That's happening on the ground, and that focus of that is very much the disengagement because of the very close-up deployment. Both of us are ahead of our normal operating bases and normal positions. And this is obviously a very tense and dangerous situation. So the military commanders are focusing on disengagement. With my counterpart, I had at various points of time, also naturally that's been the focus. We had an agreement which was in public domain in Moscow in September 2020. We continue to meet from time to time where we happen to, intersect. And the future, frankly, the current state of the relationship, which is obviously not good to put it mildly, and the future of the relationship remains the issue. And the reason why, when he gave me that trick question, I do think, what kind of relationship we will have with China, what should be the strategy, what could be their strategy. And as I said, I accept that the world is a competitive place, So I think it requires a kind of a deep strategizing, which is why I gave Anant the answer that I did. Regarding your question, look, I honestly don't like this word China plus one. I mean, to me, India attracts business if India is attractive enough. Whether business leaves country A or B or is a new business, I should not reduce myself to saying I will get business from some other place. That should not be my aspiration. I would like new businesses to grow in this country, to come from outside. And for me today, how to, by making it easier to do business, by creating through Gati Shakti a much more efficient infrastructure, we have to, we should approach business in a positive manner. We're not doing business against somebody. We are good enough today to attract technology, talent. We are able to innovate. Our manufacturing capabilities are good enough. So it's a test of ourselves. That's what I would like to prove to myself. On the visa issue, I think if anybody wants to come to India, we actually have a mechanism in place, which is employment visa. I find the employment visa numbers have actually gone up in recent years. Many more people from abroad are coming and working in Indian facilities. But certainly if you feel that for your particular need, because we had a brief chat before I came in, if you feel the system needs to be improved, we are always willing to do anything that will improve our business environment. Finally, to conclude, on the dual citizenship, I look at this moment, and this was during Atalji's time, that we arrived at a sort of modus vivendi, which was the overseas citizenship. I know there's been an ongoing conversation on it, but I would say I have not heard anything which would suggest that we are actually contemplating a dual citizenship at this point.
Okay, so I'll let, because we're out of time, I've got lot many more questions, but because we're running out of time, I'll let Raja have I'll ask one quick one, which is not at all, very easy. It's a very easy question. It's a very selfish question because I want my sales team. I was reading your book and you're talking about how personal equations are so important in finance, in your field. You must have the most diverse, difficult, thick Rolodex in the world. I'm not even like making a tall statement when I say that. Like you know everybody in every part of the world to kind of get through. You've got all kinds of contacts. So just how do you maintain so many relationships? I mean, do you send like WhatsApp jokes forwards? Like what do you do? How do you actually do it? And I want all the sales people at Indian Express to please hear the answer, because
it might surprise you. I actually do that sometimes. I do send WhatsApp forward, WhatsApp jokes, but look, it's a mix. First of all, it's much easier to do it now. Okay. I mean, you can, one of the problems my colleagues have is often I talk to my counterparts and my colleagues figure out because they're seeing it on Twitter, on X. Huh?
Yeah.
So today, the nature of diplomacy itself is changing. More people directly reach out to each other. You don't go through cumbersome, protocol process systems. What happens when you've been around for some time is it's like any profession, any sort of gathering. You make friends. You hang out together. You eat together. You spend time together. You commiserate together. So over a period of time, there's like a kind of a fraternity, which builds up. If fraternity can also include women, and then you keep it up. Partly, of course, I mean, you'd see whenever you go, I make that effort to meet people because I have realized one thing. However, you can send messages, you can be in touch with people, but at least for that first getting to know, it has to be in person. So during COVID, many of us dealt with other people. We saw them for a long time only on the screen. When you actually met them, they're not always what they look like on the screen. So if you take the trouble, you get to people. But there are colleagues or counterparts with whom I have a particular shared interest, or we send things like I have, for example, to give an example, those who are interested in cricket. So sometimes we exchange, or it could be other stuff. It could be music. It could be a movie. And I often call up people honestly when I have nothing particular, no business to transact. I sometimes just call up people like, "How are you doing?" kind of thing, and it's exactly the kind of
normal relationship
the relationship building. But it's important. This is really what makes a difference.
I believe.
Minister, just wanted to say that all good things must come to an end, and we're really grateful on behalf of the Indian Express to have you with us. I hope we don't have to wait for the next book for you to come back to us or the next Ramnath Goenka lecture. But everyone assumes your government is coming back. Everyone also assumes you'll be back in the cabinet. So as you said this evening, the next 5 years are going to be even more decisive for India. And the way India relates to the world, and the way the world relates to India, we're going to see a lot of accelerations. So we hope to see you back in the middle of Express and to one of your early engagements in the next government, at least to lay out what the new agenda of this government is going to be, because the Prime Minister has talked about doing bolder things. There's going to be a 100-day action plan. So we really want you to come back and use our platform to really lay out what the next 5 years are going to look like for India. But if you want to do it before the elections, you're welcome again. Please join me in thanking the Minister.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I would now like to invite